There may never again be an arc like Marineford. Not just in One Piece, but in manga in general. As much as people to this day praise Marineford as the most epic and most heartbreaking arc in One Piece, the full vision behind this storyline is criminally underappreciated. Not just in how long it took to set up, not just in how it was executed, but the countless threads of storytelling that came together all at once, in a way that I've yet to see any other work of fiction come even close to replicating. And to fully understand what I mean, I'm going to first talk about Marineford from a writing standpoint, purely as a writing feat. What Oda actually accomplished in terms of story structure and narrative mastery, constructing the entire first 600 chapters of One Piece around this climactic finish, before then getting into the deeper themes and heavy symbolism that set the foundation for the rest of the series. Marineford was all about Luffy, and the way it reframed Luffy's entire journey to Pirate King is the most important element of the arc to break down. However, before we get to Luffy, we actually first need to start with Zoro, and you'll see why in a bit. When we first meet Zoro, he is a big fish in a small pond, a notoriously strong swordsman, the terror of East Blue, who easily defeats anyone who comes up against him. Zoro has a burning drive to become the world's strongest swordsman. It is all that he truly cares about, and he absolutely believes that he has what it takes to be the strongest. And by all accounts, it looks like he does have the strength to back up his ambition. Until he meets Mihawk. And 50 chapters into the story, suddenly Zoro's entire perception of the world, of himself, and of his dream is shattered. In this moment, Zoro is forced to come to terms with the fact that he is not the man he thought he was. Everything that he prided himself on, everything that he believed he could achieve, has been brutally stomped on. In this moment, Zoro is broken. And it is from this moment that he is then forced to pick up the pieces and get back up. Humbled, but with a greater understanding of what he actually needs to become in order to achieve his ambition. So from here, the true character journey of Roronoa Zoro can begin, and we see it regularly throughout the series from this point on. Rather than following a man who believes he is already good enough to be the world's strongest swordsman, we are now following a man who is constantly pushing himself to get closer and closer to becoming the world's strongest swordsman. This type of moment is, of course, not unique to Zoro. For main characters of any series, manga or not, you can expect some sort of moment that breaks the hero. A moment that spurs a change in their character, or at least their goals, or maybe their understanding of the world, a moment where they do not win, and are forced to experience a low point in their journey. In plenty of series, characters will experience this multiple times across multiple story arcs. Zoro had his moment 50 chapters in. And Luffy had his moment 500 chapters in. And that is the first reason that there is really no storyline like Marineford. Because in no other series is there a main character who has been handled like Luffy. For 500 chapters, Luffy was written as the Miracle Man. Like the sun traveling from east to west, Luffy was frequently portrayed as the light of hope moving across the sea, encountering those who were oppressed or in need and acting as the answer to their prayers. Luffy was not written as a character who needed to regularly fall short and learn lessons, as a large part of the point of Luffy was that he was always himself, and he was the one who had to show the light to others he encountered. That's not to say that Luffy never had to grow. He of course had his own personal arcs over time. But the concept of the character has always been the embodiment of freedom and strength of will, continually proving that if there is a will, there is a way, which is why it was so important that Luffy always succeeded. Tasks that seemed impossible to the helpless citizens of troubled islands, obstacles that seemed insurmountable to ordinary people, tyrants that seemed too powerful for anyone to possibly overcome, always, Luffy would prove everyone's expectations wrong in the end. Shellstown, Orangetown, Syrup Village, Baratier, Arlong Park, Little Garden, Drum Kingdom, Alabasta, Skypiea, Water 7, Thriller Bark, just over and over. How many times do we see this same setup of helpless islanders in need of one man who can do what none of them can? It is always Luffy who is the savior in the end. And that's not to say he never lost. It would be terrible to follow a series where the main character never loses. But there's an important distinction here. A true defeat for a character usually involves them having to face the sense that they have lost something, or forces them to actually come to terms with not succeeding, or makes them experience potentially long-term consequences. But Luffy's losses were different. Luffy's losses actually only somehow reinforced this notion of him being this miracle man, as no matter what happened to him, it did not matter, as he always immediately bounced back, never shaken, never disheartened. Any single setback only had him come back stronger. Over 500 chapters, we never once saw Luffy lose hope. We never once saw Luffy feel that he could not defeat someone with enough effort. We never once saw Luffy truly have to acknowledge the limits of his abilities. No matter how badly someone beat him, it had no effect. Crocodile put it best. Over and over he has crushed Luffy, impaled him, stomped him, buried him alive, and yet here Luffy is again, back as usual as though nothing happened. Luffy's spirit, his confidence, his belief literally never wavers. Time and again he keeps trying till through sheer grit, determination, and strength of will he does what others believe to be impossible. And as the world kept opening up, so too did Luffy's victories become more staggering, more unbelievable. It didn't matter who the opponent was, taking down a warlord of the sea, going up to heaven and defeating God himself, even declaring war on the entire world and coming out on top. As Usopp reflects post-Marineford, what we had been shown over 500 chapters was a seemingly unstoppable character. He expresses what we had all begun to feel, like Luffy really could do anything, that no challenge was too great for him in the end. So essentially 500 chapters of a one-of-a-kind hero, who's hardly written like a man but again, more like a force of nature, the embodiment of freedom and strength of will, traveling across the world bringing the light of hope wherever he goes, the ultimate savior, the miracle man, the one you always bet on. No matter what, at the end of the day, Luffy would find a way to end whatever injustice was occurring. And then we get to the red line. Literally and figuratively, Luffy is finally about to come up against a wall. Something is going to happen to this main character that seemed previously inconceivable, precisely because of how Oda wrote Luffy for the 500 chapters up till this point. Luffy, who has been traveling through the seas for so long with so much success despite all of the warnings and claims about the dangers of the Grand Line, disregarding the supposed impossibility of the path to Pirate King, now, halfway through his journey, it is finally time for Luffy to experience the true level of the world and the truth about his dream. It is finally time to break him. The red line, as the very deliberate first visual to begin the Marineford saga, is a wall so vast, so daunting, so seemingly unscalable, a wall where you cannot even imagine the top, as Luffy himself is about to experience a metaphorical wall much like this. Now, how do you break a hero like Luffy? The Sabaody incident theoretically should have been enough. It would have been enough for most stories and for most protagonists. That entire scene of Kuma vanishing the Straw Hats one by one is heartbreaking on its own. Luffy losing every single comrade that he has so painstakingly collected over this long journey, friend after friend lost as he helplessly watches, and it finally affects Luffy in a way that we have never seen throughout the 500 chapters we've known him. Even in the past incidents where we've seen Luffy falling short, where he is struggling to protect his crew or people he cares about, he has always still been the Luffy that we know, still fighting and demanding that the villains stop. But now, finally, against Kuma, there is truly nothing that he can do. Now, finally, the fearless, unshakable protagonist is truly helpless, and he's not resolute, he's not confident, he's not demanding, he's begging, he's pleading for Kuma to stop. Here, for the first time, he realizes that there is nothing he can actually do. For the first time, Luffy is forced to experience the limits of his strength and abilities. This hits so hard as Luffy is a main character who has never once questioned himself over the entirety of the narrative of One Piece. He's been uncertain of what to do, but never uncertain of who he is, and this moment leaves Luffy questioning himself for the first time in the series. For the first time, he is questioning himself what is wrong with him. We'll return to this moment in a bit, but just keep in mind that this is the first time in the series that the protagonist questions himself. However, this is not enough, and Oda recognizes it's not enough. Oda has spent 500 chapters writing Luffy as the miracle man with an unbreakable spirit. For a hero that has built up such a ridiculous streak of continuous victories and impossible successes like Luffy, this hero needs to be broken far more severely to do the trick. And so while the Sabaody incident may have been enough to make Luffy question himself, for a hero built up as much as Luffy, it would not be enough to break his spirit. As traumatic as this experience is, as expected, Luffy bounces back yet again. Even after he's sent flying from Sabaody, he still believes that one day he will defeat everyone who just beat them, and he has his confidence back in Amazon Lily. So Oda sets Luffy back on his feet again. Luffy seems to have lost his crew, but thankfully it seems like everyone is likely fine. And sure, Luffy was defeated, but he can still fix all this. Only now we find out that there's a far more dire situation. Luffy's brother's life is on the line. We've already seen how much Luffy loves Ace, and this time it's not like when Kuma just teleported his crew away. Ace is going to be executed if Luffy does not save him. So this is a crucial point to understand. Throughout the entirety of the series, this is the single most personal scenario Luffy has ever had on his hands. So often, Luffy is fighting for the sake of his friends, coming into their lives and fighting on their behalf to save what is important to them. Only now, for the first time, Luffy is on his own and he has to actually save what is important to him. Possibly the closest person he has in the entire world, his brother. And this is where Oda's 500 chapters of world building come into play. In that for so long the Straw Hats have been sailing in a sort of protected bubble, where they keep briefly encountering these otherworldly, undefeatable threats that thankfully don't bother them for too long. We keep hearing about the great powers of the world that are looming in the distance that luckily they don't have to deal with yet, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, Oda does the unimaginable and reveals that we are going to get all of them, all at the same time. All the admirals, all the Shichibukai, all the marines, every titanic, terrifying, undefeatable monster that Oda has built up over the course of 500 chapters. Suddenly they are all coming out to play, and specifically they're all coming out to kill Ace. It's like Oda took forever to set up these major threats bit by bit in the reader's mind, taking the time to maximize our anticipation for each character individually, and then all of a sudden went all in and pushed them all onto the board at once, while dropping Luffy's helpless brother right in the middle. That is how you create an absolutely nerve-wracking, edge-of-your-seat scenario. Every single colossal threat that seemed so far away is suddenly an immediate impending calamity converging all around the person Luffy cares about the most, creating a challenge of exponentially greater stakes for our main character than anything else in his journey so far. Every single time Luffy has done the impossible in the story till now, every single time he has proven himself unbreakable, unstoppable, the very essence of who he is now going to be put on the test on a completely different scale than ever before, with the consequences of failure being far greater than ever before. And it starts with Impel Down, where again Oda's world building comes into play for this setup. Much like the Admirals and the Yonko and the great threats of the world, Impel Down has been built up as this inescapable fortress, with the Enies Lobby arc serving to cement the name Impel Down in our minds as essentially meaning the point of no return. And so yet again, Luffy attempts to take on the impossible for the 100th time in the story, breaking in and out of Impel Down, which is framed repeatedly throughout One Piece as essentially being hell itself. So for the sake of his brother, Luffy literally descends into hell, and even here he continually manages to surpass expectations, fighting to get deeper and deeper until he runs into the devil himself. And despite Luffy going all out, using his abilities to the fullest with Ace's life on the line, even giving up his own hands if that's what it takes to win this fight, here yet again, we see Luffy fail. Sabaody was not enough. Yet again, when Luffy went all out, when it mattered the most, he fell completely and utterly short. But this is still not enough, is it? Luffy never falls down forever, he always bounces back, he literally always finds a way because, as we are told, miracles come to those who never give up. Luffy is lucky enough to fall into the hands of the miracle worker Ivankov, and even she cannot save Luffy alone. Even she can only give Luffy a 2 to 3% chance of survival. The only thing sustaining him is his own willpower, and so then, for literally 20 hours straight, his body is destroyed and rebuilt with Luffy barely clinging onto life through sheer willpower. He actually loses 10 years of his life anyway, and yet despite all that, once again, thanks to his unbreakable spirit, he is once again able to pull off yet another miracle, as he has so many times throughout the story. This time the most extreme of all, he is somehow alive after being killed by the devil and buried in the deepest levels of hell, and yet here he is back up and ready to actually break out of hell to save Ace. And so now yet again Luffy has experienced absolute defeat and has pushed through with an unbreakable spirit, and yet again he is coming back full force with absolute determination, and he legitimately does overturn hell itself for the sake of saving his brother. And now he's headed to Marineford, where he will be nothing more than an ant in a storm, as nearly every single god tier character that we know in the story so far is engaging in all-out war there. A single pacifista that Luffy could not defeat is a mere foot soldier in this battle of monsters, and here we see him so ridiculously, embarrassingly out of his depth it's almost unbelievable. The hero that has always ended up as the strongest fighter on every single island we have visited so far. The hero that has been the unstoppable force defeating tyrants no one thought could be defeated. The liberating force of hope for countless nations. He is being crushed and humiliated and taunted and kicked around left and right for dozens of chapters. He's practically stumbling and crawling to save his brother, and finally when all hope seems lost and yet again it seems like he's done for, he can't do it. He puts his life on the line, all or nothing, demanding another adrenaline boost even if it will kill him, because he knows life would not be worth living if he failed here. And so literally running purely on adrenaline and willpower, he finally has that big hero moment we've been waiting for. Luffy should genuinely be dead right now. He's essentially a walking corpse. He has given more than he has in any other arc in One Piece history by several magnitudes. He has failed more, bled more, and fought more than any other time in the series, and now finally he gets what we have all been waiting for, what is supposed to happen. The guy who never gives up overcomes the impossible yet again, as he always does. It was infinitely harder than ever before, and it took more than ever before, but yet again he did it. He saved Ace. And then, in a single moment, it is ripped away. There are 3 reasons I believe this was the greatest breaking of a main character any story has ever done. Note, I'm not talking about how the long-term fallout of this was handled, as you could argue that the long-term effects that this storyline had on Luffy's character aren't nearly as significant as other heroes in other stories, and I would be inclined to agree. But I'm just talking about the Marineford arc. I'm just talking about the build-up to this moment, and really this moment itself. The actual breaking of the character is better than anything you ever see. Because main characters failing, experiencing a loss, maybe multiple particularly brutal losses, all of that is common in fiction. But with One Piece, as I've been saying, the Marineford moment hits that much harder, as it's the culmination of everything that had been built up to this point in terms of our framework for this series. How this series formula works and how this series main character works. One Piece is not some dark, gritty story. It's a series about hope. Arcs always end with a powerful infusion of hope. Seeing good vanquish evil. And Luffy embodies that sense of hope maybe better than any other main character, simply because of how many times he's done this. The cycle over and over again. Innocent people in despair, unbeatable forces of evil and oppression, an impossible task, no one can do it, only Luffy. Only Luffy, only Luffy. Only he can bring out the light in the darkness. Only Luffy can free East Blue. Only Luffy can save Alabasta. Only Luffy can defeat God. Only Luffy can fight the world. He falls down, gets back up, falls down, gets back up, over and over, no matter the stakes, no matter the challenge, no matter what anyone else says is possible, only Luffy can prove them wrong, over and over and over and over, drilling this formula into our heads over 500 chapters, just building in this absolute sense of faith in this character. He is what makes One Piece One Piece. No matter what, we can rely on this story to bring us that sense of joy and catharsis in the end, because we are following the story of this man, who will always find a way to victory in the end. Oda spent 500 chapters structuring this story around these elements, structuring the main character around this ideal, creating an ironclad formula of what is supposed to happen. How we are always supposed to feel at the end of each and every arc, all so that finally when that formula breaks into a million pieces, when we see this happen to Luffy of all people, it hits that much incomparably harder, because that much more time has been put into building a story and hero where this scene should simply never happen. This scene is simply not One Piece. What is being shattered here is not just the main character, it is the formula of One Piece itself. The second reason is the series of events Oda put Luffy and the reader through in the Marineford saga itself to make this moment that much more devastating. Even if you ignored everything I said in the previous reason about the 500 chapters of setup, even ignoring the prior framework of what type of story this is, how Luffy has been built up to this point, what the formula is supposed to be, even just within the Marineford saga itself, on Luffy's quest to save Ace, you would be hard-pressed to find a main character in any other story who goes through everything Luffy did only to still lose. It's not just the past history of Luffy's character always achieving the impossible, it's the fact that in the Impel Down and Marineford storyline itself, every single shonen trope was thrown at this arc to make us feel that there was simply no way Luffy could fall short. I mean, the story even begins with Luffy having already experienced the most crushing and traumatic experience of his journey so far, so he's already starting from emotional rock bottom when he begins this quest to save his brother. And yet, even from this low point, he does actually begin scaling a seemingly unscalable mountain. Over the course of this storyline, he redefines the meaning of going above and beyond. To save Ace, Luffy literally goes to hell and back, throws away decades of his lifespan, has his body broken into pieces and rebuilt, walks into a world war, is repeatedly crushed by the most powerful beings on the planet, comes back from death's door with a miraculous resurrection, make that 2 miraculous resurrections, even unlocks the grand, heroic, chosen one ability. He goes through every single trope in the book, every single dramatic rise and fall you'd expect on the path to triumph, and over without fail, this man keeps telling us he will achieve the impossible yet again. He makes this promise over and over, swaying the great figures from across the world to put their faith in him, to the point he's even got the main villain of the series believing he can do it. Luffy completes this grand odyssey, pulls off countless miracles, performs the 12 labors, basically runs the whole gamut, and he still loses. There is no other storyline I've read where the phrase, "all that for nothing," fits better. There is no single defeat that hits harder. And lastly, the third reason this was the greatest breaking of a main character I have ever seen is that the moment Oda chose to break the formula he so carefully constructed, of all moments for Luffy to finally fail, that moment was the one time Luffy absolutely could not afford to. This was the moment where it was all on the line for him. Again, Luffy is usually fighting on behalf of someone else to save someone else's village, to save someone else's loved ones. Finally, in Marineford, it's his own brother, it's his own storyline. It's the one person in the world he loves the most. After all those times where Luffy has gone against the odds and kept getting back up till he overcame the impossible, the one time he is unable to do so is when it matters the most. And so these 3 reasons, the combination of spending 500 chapters setting such a positive, feel-good, hope-inspiring formula for the story driven by a main character who across those 500 chapters never falters, always bounces back, always keeps fighting and fighting till he achieves the impossible and always brings the light in the end, to then give that main character the most high-stakes and personal scenario of his life where he absolutely must succeed and failure is not an option, and then have him actually outdo everything he has done in the story so far, trying even harder, sacrificing even more, pushing his limits even further than he himself has ever done before, and then still utterly and completely failing. That is an absolute masterclass in breaking your protagonist. So all of that is to say that Oda absolutely earns this moment. We see Luffy shattering in a way that we could have never imagined. His mind has shut down, his body is broken, his heart is absolutely crushed, and most importantly, his spirit is finally shattered. Oda pulled out all the stops to make it so even Luffy, this ceaselessly optimistic, strong-willed hero of heroes, has his spirit broken. This is the first and only time in the series where Luffy no longer believes he can be Pirate King. And it finally forces Luffy to face a reality that he never had to contend with before. As I talked about earlier, At this moment in Sabaody, after losing his crew to Kuma, that was the first time we ever see Luffy questioning himself. Now, at the end of Marineford, we get the next step. We see Luffy finally come to the realization that he is not who he thought he was. As I've been saying like a broken record so far, Luffy has always been the character who can do what others cannot, who can overcome what no one thought possible. And in doing so, he has always been able to protect those he cares about, and that is how he has always defined himself. Going all the way back to Arlong Park, Luffy explains that even though there are many things he cannot do, the one simple thing he can do is defeat Arlong. And that is essentially Luffy's role in a nutshell. It's why Oda always saves the unbeatable arc boss for him. The one thing Luffy can trust himself to do is take on the biggest, baddest threat so that those he cares about will be safe. And by the time of Enies Lobby, Luffy has come to realize that not only is that what his role is, that is in fact his responsibility, his burden, to be strong enough to protect those he cares about. That is what Luffy holds himself to, and that is what we, the reader, have seen his role as. But over the course of the Marineford saga, which literally begins with Luffy patting himself on the back for not having lost anyone so far, from the Sabaody incident onwards, Luffy is not the character we know. He is not able to protect anything or anyone. He can't even protect himself. And that's the worst part, that at the end of the day, Ace died specifically because Luffy was too weak to protect himself. And in this moment, Luffy needed to be saved. For a character who up till now defined himself by being able to protect those he cares about, for him to lose the one person he cares about the most, specifically because Luffy himself needed to be protected, that destroys his entire self-image. It's as though despite this long journey, this countless string of successes that he has racked up, in this one moment it's as though none of it matters because he hasn't actually grown out of being this weakling that needs to be protected. Luffy is not who he thought he was, and that simultaneously makes him realize that he is no Pirate King. In this moment, everything that people have been telling him all along, that he is just a naive dreamer, that he has no idea what the true level of the world is, that he has no hope of being Pirate King, all of it is simply true. For someone who has been so ridiculously, unabashedly certain of this one constant about himself, that he is the man who will become Pirate King, who has never for a single moment questioned this absolute truth, this is the ultimate moment of disillusionment. He is experiencing what Zoro experienced 50 chapters in, but again, for Luffy, it hits that much harder considering it is literally 500 chapters in. And the experience actually splits the entire narrative of One Piece in half. Prior to this realization by Luffy is pre-time skip, and everything after is post-time skip. Just an incredibly visionary setup for the main character's journey by Oda. So let's talk about the themes that come out of this. So I've already covered a lot of Marineford's themes in this video on the philosophy of One Piece, which you should check out after this one. You can click on it from the link on the top right. Which is why I'm not going to be addressing ideas like justice and power here, but rather focusing on themes that are more so related to Luffy and the Straw Hat's journey. And to get to that discussion, we actually need to talk about the two most important characters from Marineford, Ace and Whitebeard. So to start with, what was the story of Ace? Ace was a child who from the start questioned whether or not he should have been born. After all, he was born without parents, and the legacy of one of his parents actually caused him great pain. So for the longest time, whether he realized it or not, he needed to feel like he was not alone in this world. He needed to know that there were people who loved him. At the same time, Ace stubbornly attempts to reject those who try to get close to him. He does this with Luffy, he does this with Whitebeard. It is likely not until his time on the execution stand itself, where he realizes how many people are actually there for him, that he understands how important it was that he was not alone in this world. And that is precisely why Whitebeard's character, why his story so perfectly complements Ace's. Whitebeard from the start realized the importance of having a family. He realized that many out there needed one, even if they didn't know it yet. Repeatedly throughout Marineford, the contrast between Whitebeard and Roger is played up, as though Whitebeard was somehow lesser for not accomplishing what Roger did. But in reality, that was largely the point. For so long we've been hearing about the greatness of Roger, the Pirate King, the man Luffy has been trying to emulate. But through Whitebeard we are shown a man who we are meant to understand is actually just as great. Even though he never conquered the Grand Line, even though he never found the world's greatest treasure, even though he just wanted a family, yet he seems to be just as great a man as Roger. The point being that no matter how strong you are, no matter what you are trying to achieve, having that love, that family is just as important. And this notion that is played up throughout the arc through the characters of Ace and Whitebeard is precisely what brings Luffy back from the brink of despair. No, Luffy is not invincible, he is not unbreakable. Despite everything he has accomplished up till this point, all the people he's saved, the miracles he's performed, even he has his limits. But when even he realizes that he is not strong enough, it is thanks to the fact that he knows he still has people worth protecting, people who still believe in him. That's what gives him the motivation to get back up and try again. When finally, for the first time ever, Luffy's own willpower is not enough to get him to stand back up, the memory of his friends, of his family, that is what is able to lift him back up. This whole arc hammers in the importance of having a family, of not being alone, because no matter how strong Ace's will is or Luffy's will is, they need others by their side. That's also why Luffy's ability to bring people to his side is highlighted so much this arc. That is indeed the most dangerous power in the sea. The very same thing Akainu mocks Whitebeard for, caring about his family, is in fact the very reason that Whitebeard and his gigantic alliance, who love him like a father, are a threat to the world government in the first place. Not to mention, it's no mistake that the Marineford arc, the one arc where Luffy truly and utterly fails, is also the one arc that Luffy does not have his crew. He does not have his family by his side. It's a reminder that Luffy alone is not enough. As Usopp says, Luffy alone cannot do everything. Every single Straw Hat realizes here that Luffy needs their help by his side. It puts so much of the past story into perspective as well. So far, Luffy has fought and defeated other contenders for Pirate King, most notably the two Shichibukai he has faced so far, Crocodile and Moria, who both have a similar history of once being up-and-coming rookies who aimed for Pirate King, only to hit a wall, to be crushed in the New World, and be sent running back to paradise, their spirits broken. All the same beats that Luffy is now experiencing. And what was the most important characteristic that Oda highlighted about these two failed Pirate King candidates? Crocodile was all about the idea of not caring about others. Over and over he raved about how there is no value to friends, no value to relying on others, no value to trusting others, and so on. And Moria similarly didn't believe in the value of human subordinates. He now only wanted an undead crew with no sentimental value attached to them. Why did Oda highlight these philosophies for these particular pirates? Why did he make sure that we encountered these failed Pirate King candidates along the way before the New World? Because at the end of the day, when Luffy reaches the same stage in his journey that they once did, the moment that he finally gets a taste of the true level of the seas, when Luffy hits the inevitable wall that all rookies do, when he is completely broken, spirit shattered, dream in pieces, the one thing that allows him to overcome this and get back up is the one thing Crocodile and Moria don't have: his friends. Luffy does in fact experience the exact things that Crocodile and Moria warn him about: the true level of the sea, the nightmare of the New World. They are correct that Luffy is not strong enough, and that's the beauty of it, that they are not in fact wrong. Luffy himself is broken by the New World the same way that they were, but he has the one thing that they are missing that will allow him to continue pushing forward where they fell. This time, not his own strength of spirit, but rather the loved ones he has and the strength he draws from them to get up and try again. That is the real difference between Luffy and these failed pirates. The stories of the great failed pirates Luffy faces leading up to Marineford perfectly set us up for the realization of the one crucial thing Luffy has that is the actual key to him succeeding where they failed. And it's particularly interesting that in Marineford, we even get a resurgence for Crocodile. He's going back to the New World, and this time he's not going alone. Throughout his time in Baroque Works, Crocodile never trusted anyone. All his subordinates were simply pawns for him, and he was defeated. This time, Crocodile seems to actually have found a legitimately loyal follower in Mr. One, someone Crocodile seems to genuinely rely on and see a need for, which, whether Crocodile is aware of it or not, is a subtle difference from the way he used to think. It's even interesting that Crocodile frees Mr. One in a manner very similar to Luffy freeing Zoro, Kaido freeing King, and Blackbeard inadvertently freeing Shiryu. Historically, this has been a neat parallel of how Oda has portrayed an actual bond being set between a captain and a first mate. So across the board, through Whitebeard, through Ace, and even through Crocodile, we can see how Marineford highlights the importance of not being alone, the importance of having allies, having friends, having family, who can pick you up and support you even when you have reached your own limit. However, all of that being said, that's only one part of the equation. Again, the first lesson that we get out of Marineford is that Luffy's ability to make allies, as well as the family that he currently has, are the most invaluable things that he currently possesses. However, the point is that Luffy already has these things. This arc was partly about making him, and the reader, realize that this is what he has that is so valuable. The other side of Marineford's thematic messaging is about what Luffy needs to now attain. This will be a bit of a step-by-step explanation, so stick with me for a moment. It begins with the definition of Pirate King. Up till the Marineford arc, all we had were two simple statements on what it means to be Pirate King. To be the king of the seas, and in Luffy's mind, the freest man on the seas. However, after Marineford, what it means to be the king and what it means to be the freest are finally made clear. First, it's important to understand that the actual real-world definition of freedom is the power to act without hindrance or restraint, the absence of subjection to foreign domination or despotic government. Freedom very literally means the power to not be controlled. You might think of freedom as things like sailing the world, exploring, adventuring, etc., but those are simply things that are possible with freedom. Freedom itself is the power to be able to do these things without a greater force being able to stop you. The power to not be helpless to any greater oppressive force. And most importantly, as we're shown in One Piece, the power to not have the things you care about taken away. The Marineford saga is the perfect thematic conclusion to the first half of One Piece, as it begins by definitively establishing that freedom is the true, central theme of the story, and the ultimate goal of the main character. And after establishing this, the following events of the arc establish why freedom is so desperately needed in this world. And finally, the conclusion of the arc establishes what is needed to achieve this goal of freedom. Right now, there is a force that has ruled the world for 800 years, and at the end of the day, this is the true ruler of the sea. The same force that killed Ace, the same force that seemingly killed Sabo. The world government is the strongest force in existence, and as such, no one truly has freedom. The same reason the Pirate King would be the freest man in the sea is the same reason finding the One Piece would coincide with the world government's fall. The Pirate King, the true king of the sea, does not have to rule anyone, but also could not be stopped by anyone. There would be no force above them, no force that could destroy what they loved or cared about. That's why at the end of the arc it is explained to us that Roger's most notable trait was that he became unstoppable when it came to protecting his crewmates. Now, I've noticed a lot of people take issue with the idea that Luffy's goals have anything to do with becoming strong. Even though Luffy has made it absolutely explicitly clear that this is a necessity, a lot of readers still prefer to ignore this, most likely because other shonen series have led many to believe that a goal of being the strongest is a shallow, generic motivation. But that unfortunately undervalues the actual layered context of the One Piece story. The full context of the world Oda has constructed makes it so that Luffy needs to become strong in order to become free, which is a far more nuanced and compelling take on the concept, and it's an idea that has been built from the start of the story. Again, from the very beginning, it was established that while Luffy needs his friends to help him for many things, to do everything he cannot, ultimately Luffy's role is that he needs to be able to defeat any threat that they cannot. This is reiterated more explicitly the further we go in the story. When it comes down to it, the burden is on Luffy to keep everyone else safe. As if Luffy cannot defeat any enemy that may threaten them, then he will lose those he cares about. Therefore, he absolutely needs to become the strongest. At the same time, we have the idea established that Luffy's main desire is freedom, and it is established that the Pirate King is synonymous with being the freest. In Marineford, these two ideas, Luffy's responsibility to be able to protect anyone, and Luffy's desire to be the freest, are tied together in that it is made clear that strength and freedom are one and the same due to the unfortunate oppressive nature of the world. The lack of strength to fight back against oppressive forces means a lack of freedom. Oda makes this as clear as possible, with both times that Luffy loses someone, the two most pivotal moments of his life, Sabo's death and Ace's death, being related to freedom and strength. In Luffy's flashback after Sabo dies, Ace talks about how they need to become free, and Luffy in response expresses the need to become stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. At the end of Marineford, after Ace dies, Luffy realizes he's still not the freest man because he's too weak. He's still not strong enough. Both of these incidents reinforce the idea that having things taken from you against your will reflects a lack of freedom, which in turn is then associated with the underlying cause of this lack of freedom being a lack of strength. This weakness is ultimately what drives Luffy. He needs to become strong enough to be free, to be a man who cannot let the people he cares about be taken from him. That is what Roger was depicted as, the man who would never allow anyone to take his loved ones from him. That is what Luffy struggles with throughout the Marineford saga, that he is not changed from being this weak little kid, that even though he believed he had become a man who could protect anyone, that even though he believed he would certainly achieve the status of Pirate King as the freest, what he was hit with again and again is that he is not that man yet. That's why he is questioning what is wrong with me, as he loses every crewmate. That's why he realizes he is no Pirate King as he loses his brother. He does not have freedom because he does not have strength to stop oppressive forces. He does not have the strength to protect what he cares about. As much as the importance of having loved ones, of having a family is played up this arc, so too is the importance of having the strength to be able to protect that family. This whole saga's thematic argument is structured beautifully. Again, beginning with Luffy giving his definition of Pirate King as the freest man, and ending with the realization that he does not yet have that freedom because he is not yet strong enough, as the entirety of the events of the saga have served to show him. And so the notion that Luffy needs to be strong enough to protect anyone he cares about, a notion that has been played up repeatedly so much throughout the series, is essentially tied together with the notion of being the freest and being the Pirate King this arc. It sets a new idea in place, that the day that Luffy can topple an entity like the world government, the day that Luffy can be the man that Whitebeard spoke of, the day Luffy can, through his own power, make sure that something like this or this never happens, that is when he would be a true Pirate King, the freest man in the sea. And of course, again, Luffy cannot do this alone. Of course, Luffy needs his friends. He has always known that and said that from day one. That's why there are two halves to the messaging of Marineford. Firstly, emphasizing the importance of having others by your side, showing how this really has been Luffy's greatest ability throughout the series, and reminding Luffy of the importance of his crew. And then at the same time, making it explicitly clear that as much as others can help Luffy, Luffy himself needs to, in turn, be able to protect everyone he cares about. At the end of the day, even with an entire Yonko Empire, multiple Shichibukai, and dozens of New World captains backing him, Luffy still could not save Ace because he himself was not strong enough. He himself was the weak link when it mattered most. Ace died because Luffy needed to be protected, because willpower alone is not enough. Luffy needs strength to achieve what he wants to achieve. He needs strength to protect what he wants to protect. On the one hand, it is symbolic that the one arc Luffy failed was the one arc he did not have his crew with him. But at the same time, the whole point is that the reason he did not have his crew with him was because he was not strong enough to protect them. It's a more layered message. It's not all about Luffy needing to be strong, and it's not all about Luffy needing friends. It's both. which is why the ending to this whole saga concludes with both Luffy and his crew each realizing that they each need to grow in order to fulfill their respective roles and evolve into a true pirate king and crew. The full messaging of Marineford can be said to be the importance of not being alone, of having those who love and support you, but also the importance of being able to be strong enough to protect them from anything and anyone. And as such, the essence of freedom is when together you are strong enough that no one can hold power over you. This saga is thematically the perfect conclusion to Act 1 of One Piece, brilliantly pulling together so many ideas that have been gently hinted at throughout the series, and setting in stone a final goal for the end of the story for the main characters. So this is my favorite aspect of Marineford. It's an arc where the symbolism within it has actually gained more weight the further the narrative of One Piece has gone on. Let's start with the discussion of the most important idea in One Piece today, the dawn of the world. I've already done multiple videos breaking down this concept in depth, which you can find links to on the top right of this screen. But to quickly recap everything that we know, it has clearly been established that the entire world is waiting for a dawn, and that this dawn seems to be heavily implied to be related to the will of D. It may very well be the will of D itself, and the dawn is very likely related to the end of the Celestial Dragon's rule, as the current world government is repeatedly framed as a great darkness that rules the world, and the 800 years of the world government rule have been referred to as a long night, with only the light of the sun representing the end to the Celestial Dragon's power. We know that in particular the world is waiting on a certain man to fulfill this destiny. There is a certain man who will bring the dawn of the world. We have different names being thrown around: Joy Boy, the sun god Nika. Perhaps they are one and the same, perhaps not, but the important point is that there definitely is a certain man that Roger has been waiting for, that Odin was waiting for, that Whitebeard was waiting for, the one who will bring the dawn of the world. Whoever finds the One Piece is the one who will change the world is waiting on that man. Now, we have also been told that fate is not an absolute ironclad notion in One Piece. There is such a thing as a crossroads of fate, meaning events can go down different paths. Keep these concepts in mind, that there will one day be a man who will bring the dawn of the world, that many legendary figures are waiting on a certain man to find the One Piece and bring about this dawn, and that things are not so set in stone. There are different crossroads fate can go down, all established ideas in One Piece. And now, let us look at the stories of Ace and Luffy. It becomes more and more clear the further we read, but Ace was, by all accounts, supposed to be the man that brings the dawn of the world. He fits that archetypical chosen hero mold perfectly. He is the son of the Pirate King himself. He had a meteoric rise. The world's greatest pirate realized who he was and took him in. Whitebeard specifically groomed Ace to become the Pirate King. Whitebeard planned on Ace to be the one who would find the One Piece. Everyone knew it, the Marines knew it, the great pirates of the New World knew it, even Roger himself explicitly planned on Ace being the one to find the One Piece. Roger learned the true history and immediately resolved to have a son for this specific reason. And to top it off, Ace's ability is very literally fire. We talk about the man who will bring the dawn of the world, and Ace himself is very literally the sun. Between the two brothers, Luffy and Ace, Ace was the one who was more overtly destined for this role. That's why when we first meet Ace, he seems like everything Luffy is, but better. Smarter, older, stronger. Over time, we learn that Ace is the one who was a conqueror right from the start, while Luffy was a crying weakling who had to hide behind him. Just as Ace's father brought the dawn of a new era, Ace was always supposed to do the same. Not only was he supposed to be the light of hope for the world, Ace was the guiding light for Luffy as well. However, just because Luffy was always chasing in Ace's shadow did not mean that Luffy did not have the same potential Ace did. Luffy may have had even more. It would just take longer for him to rise to those heights. From the start, Luffy was just Ace's crying little brother who needed to be saved. But what's interesting is that Luffy, even from a young age, also had a big dream. A dream that shocked even Ace when he announced it. Not to mention a drive to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And so what's interesting is that while the world is waiting for its dawn, it's waiting for a man to find the One Piece to challenge the world to bring about that dawn, and it's supposed to be Ace. It was planned to be Ace. Whitebeard took Ace in precisely because he knew Ace was the one. At the same time, someone else noticed a different path. We don't know what Roger told Shanks, and I'm not here to speculate on that, but we do know that at the very least, Shanks saw in Luffy some sort of potential. At the very least, the potential to be the successor to Roger. We know that Shanks is betting on Luffy in some way. We know that Shanks is waiting on Luffy to achieve something. We know that Shanks believes that saving Luffy may have changed the fate of the world in some manner. So even if Shanks may not have all the knowledge Whitebeard does, as Whitebeard seems to have the full knowledge of the Will of D and the man that Roger is waiting for, Shanks at the very least has some understanding of the importance of finding a successor to Roger, that this successor will change the fate of the world in some way, and Luffy is his pick. So the same potential Whitebeard saw in Ace, Shanks saw in Luffy. And finally, it must be mentioned, along with Luffy and Ace, there is a third man that needs to be discussed: Blackbeard. Whether he is supposed to or not, Blackbeard fully intends to be the man to find One Piece and bring the world into a new era. And as we understand, if the dawn of the world represents one direction the world can go, a Blackbeard era represents the exact opposite direction. I elaborate on this in my video on Blackbeard and what he represents in the context of the world, but let's just say that it is a very different type of darkness from the world governments. If the world government were to fall and Blackbeard's rule were to take its place, then it is implied that the world would sink into an even deeper darkness than before. Someone is going to fulfill the Will of D. Someone is going to bring a new era into the world. If it is the right man, there will be a new dawn. But if it is someone like Blackbeard, the exact opposite of the type of man Roger is looking for, then there will be a new type of knight. So now looking back at the chapters leading up to Marineford, they carry so much more meaning. An event is coming that is about to split the world. One of these major crossroads of fate. Two great men meet, Roger's rival and Roger's protege. Both carry Roger's will in one way or another. And interestingly, both have already picked out a man who they believe will be the next Pirate King. When they meet on the ship, they coincidentally both make references to the man that the other has chosen, even if it's unintentional. Whitebeard asks about Shanks' arm, which Shanks explains he has bet on the New Age. He has bet on Luffy. And Shanks himself has come to talk about Ace, who just so happens to be Whitebeard's bet for the New Age. These men represent the two paths the world can go down. And of course, the disagreement is not about this, but in hindsight, everything carries so much more meaning. These are the two men who have bet on two potential bright futures for the world. Shanks is in fact here to try and help save the man that Whitebeard bet on, but it is too late for that. Nothing is going to stop the unfolding events of this era. The heavens themselves split as though fate itself is split. As fittingly, there is a tremendous crossroads of fate taking place at this very moment on another island. One of those two bright futures for the world, the more obvious choice, Whitebeard's choice, the natural successor to the Pirate King's throne, the natural pick to bring the dawn of the world, is up against the man who represents the darkest path, the man who is supposed to fulfill Roger's will and bring the dawn, and the man who represents the opposite of everything Roger stood for and who brings the darkness. These two battle. And the symbolism is so heavy in hindsight, it is very literally a battle between the sun and the darkness. And in this moment, the sun is swallowed up, and that changes the fate of the world forever. From this single symbolic battle, from this moment where the sun is snuffed out by the darkness, it triggers a cascade of events that plunges the world of One Piece into a heavier darkness. This is, after all, the trigger that leads to the events of Marineford, a war that ends in the balance of the world being completely flipped into nearly the worst state imaginable. Before the Marineford War, looking at the world at the start of the series, yes, things are bad. The world is ruled by the world government, but at the same time there is some moral balance to the state of things. In the pirate world, there are 4 emperors, 2 that we would consider villains, Kaido and Big Mom, classically evil pirates well known for annihilating countries and generally causing death and destruction. And yet there are 2 pirates that can be considered forces of good. Whitebeard is a defender of the weak and a protector of many nations, and Shanks a diplomatic, pacifistic figure. The pirate world is, in fact, balanced between forces of good and evil. Similarly, in the Marines, while there are many who will perform any atrocity in the name of justice, at the very least, the most influential figures at the top are still Sengoku and Garp. They are still at the helm of the organization, and they provide a far more moral center than, say, Akainu. But after Ace's defeat to Blackbeard, the World War is triggered, and the outcome of this war has the balance of morality completely flipped. The battle ends with the total defeat for the Whitebeard pirates and the death of Whitebeard himself, essentially completely wiping out the single greatest, most influential force for good in the world. Instead, the greatest winners are the Marines and Blackbeard himself, with Blackbeard rising to an obscene new level of power and actually taking Whitebeard's place. The greatest force for good in the world supplanted by the greatest force for evil. And within the Marines themselves, the war marks the end of a morally balanced era, with Sengoku and Garp being replaced at the helm by Akainu, who turns the Marines into a far more dangerous, more militant force for quote-unquote justice than ever before, now led by his ruthless ideology. This is the imagery that we conclude the Marineford War with. This is the new face of the Marines, and this is his vision for the world. This is the great new force in the pirate world, a man who wants only destruction and chaos. These are very explicitly the two great changes that come out of Marineford. Oda actually dedicated a full chapter to highlight them, that Blackbeard is the new great force in the pirate world that has supplanted Whitebeard, and that Akainu has taken over the Marines and turned them into an even greater force. Even the simple symbolism of the idea that white has been replaced with black basically says it all. And of course, with Ace's death, the man who was supposed to be Roger's successor, the man who was supposed to one day bring the dawn, is now gone. Blackbeard claims it is his era now, and even if it isn't, then it's no better if it's the Marines' era considering the new direction of the Marines coming out of this war. Marineford begins with Whitebeard and Sengoku as the primary faces on both sides. Whitebeard, an undeniably good man, and Sengoku, at least a decent man with perhaps an unreasonable dedication to his duty, but by the end, this is what it has devolved into, just evil versus evil. That is the tragedy of Marineford. The greatest force for good in the world dies, and the bright flame of hope for the future is blown out. The world comes perilously close to the light being completely snuffed out, however, here's the beauty of it, at the end we are reminded of something. Even if Ace was supposed to be the hope for the world, the light of hope is not truly completely extinguished, as there is still that one remaining alternate path. The world may not have Whitebeard, but there is still Shanks, and the world may no longer have Ace, but there is still Luffy, the man that Shanks picked. That's the other vision of the future we see slowly develop throughout Marineford. Even as Whitebeard begins to reach the end of his limits, even as he fears the consequences for the world after his death, even as he ponders whether his life had any meaning, even as the possibility grows that Ace, the light of hope for the future, may not survive, Whitebeard begins to notice a different light. He begins to see a different possibility, the same possibility that Shanks did. Not Ace, not Blackbeard, but the third path, Luffy. Maybe not as strong as Ace, maybe not as far along, maybe not as obviously Pirate King material, but still a potential path to the same outcome. A man who can find the One Piece, who can bring the dawn of the world. That is why Whitebeard finally begins to bet on Luffy. That is why he asks Luffy to show him what lies beyond this era. That is why throughout Whitebeard's final speech, it is Luffy who we are shown as the man who can carry the flames of Roger's will, of Ace's will. And by the end of Marineford, everyone has noticed it. The Marines, the Whitebeard pirates, the Shichibukai, even if none of them know anything about the Will of D, what matters is that they see what Luffy represents, which is a light of hope for the future, to one day be the man who can change things, the same man that Ace was supposed to be. There is still this ember of hope that Luffy could be that man instead. It is pure chance that it is Luffy who has ended up as the final hope instead of Ace. Again, it was always meant to be Ace, but a few crossroads of fate going in unexpected directions have led to a very different outcome. This moment where Blackbeard could have killed Luffy far before Luffy amounted to anything was its own crossroads of fate, and Luffy just happened to get away and survive. This moment where Ace challenged Blackbeard in place of Luffy was another crossroads of fate, resulting in Ace being the light that was extinguished instead. And finally, the last moments of the war, where Luffy could have died along with Ace, eliminating all hope for the future, were changed forever at yet another crossroads, with the fate of the world being greatly altered yet again, simply thanks to the courage of one young Marine. It is also quite fitting that the Marineford War ends with these last reminders of hope, a reminder that even though Whitebeard is gone, there is still one last force for good in the pirate world. Even if the landscape has changed to 3 evil emperors, there is still this last bastion that can keep the peace. It is fitting that Shanks appears to end this spiraling series of calamities, as proof that the world has not yet fallen completely into disarray, and as a reminder that his choice to fulfill Roger's will still remains. And so it all begins with this symbolic moment where the sun was swallowed by the darkness. This defeat led to the tragedies of Marineford, which swung the balance of the world to near absolute despair, and the main path to the dawn of the world was eradicated forever. However, complete apocalypse was held at bay at least temporarily, as it is not yet time for the true, final climactic battle for the dawn or the darkness. One other great force for good still remains to hold the peace temporarily, and a second, alternative path to the dawn of the world has been preserved. Even though the balance of the world shifts heavily towards darkness in the wake of Marineford, there is still the opportunity to bring the world into its dawn. And so it is a much darker world that Luffy comes out of the time skip and emerges into, and with the actual pivotal battle for the world coming, this time he will have to truly become the man who can bring the world into its dawn. So all of that is to say, I've never seen a storyline as elegantly set up as Marineford, with the stakes, the scope, the planning, the reveals, the thematic threads being bound together and cemented for the entire story, and the powerful symbolism throughout it that casts the entire narrative of One Piece into a new light, in terms of grand vision and large-scale planning, just putting so many layers and elements of storytelling together for one climactic conclusion to the first act of a gigantic, decades-long epic. Marineford is the greatest example of One Piece's unparalleled excellence in terms of long-form narrative construction. And if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe. Special thanks to patrons A. Abazi, Adrian Hakeem, Cesar Olagwe, Koopy Koop, God Complex, Harrison Otto, Justin Holland, Krish Roshan, Omar Gaskin, Shadow Chip, Someone, Super Gamesification, Terrence Neal, Abdullah Al-Remeti, Ace Goldie, Alejandro Magallanes, Alex Morrow, Amylite2609, Andy Tamelli, Anani, Arturo Gomez, Aslan Karimuddin, Aukani, Bartosz Sawada, Behenort, Benjamin Von Stein, Braden Heeger, Brandon Williams, Berger, Buzz7 Zilicum, CC, Carlos, Charlie Hustle, Chris Kresser, Krista Salems, Chronos6, CLO, Conqueror of Muffins, Danieru, Dark Eternal, Darth Pumpkins, Dice, Dauphin, Emigidio Alvarez, Fari, Florian, Bendari, Gabe DeChamp, Garrett Clark, Globo Jim, Regan419, I Think the Fire Festival is Going to Fail, Jabari Hodge, Jacob Heller, Jared Comley, Jaden Bafoa, Jeremy Sampar, Javon Chahal, Joe, Joel Smollett, Joey Zitka, Joe Runner Melting, Jonah Green, Jordan Hood, Josh Diaz, Juan Perret, Justin Carrier, Kai Hat Yemul, Khalid Suleiman, Koreb Tababu, Kotaha, Laura, Lun, Lena, Louis Aguirre, Mark Henderson, Melanie G, Minaj, Meruem, Michael Orr, Michelle Dreyer, Mr. S, Mr. Pike, Mohammed Al-Mehari, Moody, Mr. G, Multi2 Terminator, Newt, Noah, Noesis, Omar Mora, Oof the Oof Will Never Be Forgotten, Jose Cedric, Patron, Peyton Ward, Buktrong, Rain, Ray Lopez, Rohan Chug, Rohanite, Ryan Garada, Sam Penn, Scotty, Semicolon 3, Siddharth Vadnerker, Skora Bagatio, Socialed, Spike SP, Shrikar Govindarajula, Starlight Studios, Stephen Braceno, Tanner Murphy, The Fade Will Rail, The Boy 13th, The One Atop All, Thanks, Travis Mare, Tyler Crowley, Ulrich Kako, Val Napoli, Victor Chen, Vince T, Vinny, Wally Tamana, Wiase, William Marshall, Zach Omar, Zay Ada, Bobby M, Bruv, Dhruv Srivasta, Kumbashu, Caden Buchan, Pablo Rodriguez, and Wist.